I'd like to reconvene this meeting and welcome those present, as well as the viewing and listening audience to the 45th meeting of Joint Select Committee on Land and Physical Infrastructure. And this, the committee's second public hearing pursuant to an inquiry into the policies for the promotion of non-traditional methods of farming, including digital technology. I'd like to remind members and officials if you could please turn off your cell phones or place them on silent or vibrate. And also to indicate that this hearing is being broadcast live on Parliament Channel 2, Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. I'd like to also inform members of the viewing and listening audience that you can send in comments via email at parl101@ttparliament.org, on our Facebook page at facebook.com/ttparliament, on Twitter at @ttparliament. I'd like to welcome officials of the Agricultural Development Bank, the Fisheries, the Division of Food Production, Forestry and Fisheries, Tobago House of Assembly, and the Agricultural Society of Trinidad and Tobago. I am Derup Timal. I'm chairman of the Joint Select Committee, and I'd like to invite members to introduce themselves, starting on my right.
Hi, good morning. Rushton Parry, Vice Chairman.
Morning, Nigel Freitas, member.
Okay, other members, Mr. Wade Mark was called away to another engagement and will be joining us during this interview, and also Mrs. Glenda Jennings-Smith, member of this committee. I would like maybe starting for officials to also please introduce yourselves. Please, you can use the microphone, switch it on, and then when you are finished, switch it back off.
Good morning. I'm Wendy Sampson-Narby-Harry. I'm the Corporate Manager of Business Development at the Agricultural Development Bank.
Good morning. I'm Sunil Ricky, Corporate Manager Credit at the Agricultural Development Bank.
Good morning. I'm Shivan Ramnath, Chief Executive Officer, Agricultural Development Bank.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am Wendell Bernard, Administrator in the Division of Food Production, Forestry and Fisheries.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Joint Select Committee. I am Tamika Seals Manzano, Director of Food Crop Production in the Division of Food Production, Forestry and Fisheries.
Good morning. My name is Crystal Edwards, and I'm Fisheries Officer at the Department of Marine Resources and Fisheries under the Division of Food Production, Forestry and Fisheries.
Good morning. My name is Ronald Chan, Electrical Engineer, Director of the Agricultural Society of Trinidad and Tobago. I'm also a Director of the Agricultural Development Bank, although today I'm here representing the Agricultural Society of Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm also a commercial greenhouse hydroponic farmer.
Good morning, everyone. Dano Suku, President of the Agricultural Society of Trinidad and Tobago, also Chairperson of the Committee of Management, Chief Coordinator of the Caribbean Farmers Network, former Director at the EMBD, Estate Management and Business Development Company, and former board member of the Trinidad Transport Board.
Thank you all. I'd also like to acknowledge our secretariat from the staff of the Parliament, Secretary Ms. Masaya, and also our members in the public gallery today. We welcome you. I'd just like to summarize the objectives as we begin of this particular inquiry. We have four major objectives. First one being to determine the extent of the use of non-traditional methods of farming, including digital farming, in Trinidad and Tobago. Second, to examine the effectiveness of the policies, programs, and initiatives to promote non-traditional farming, including digital farming. Third, to examine the major challenges facing the successful implementation of non-traditional methods of farming, including digital farming. And fourth, to determine the extent to which non-traditional methods of farming can be used to reduce Trinidad and Tobago's food import bill and improve food security. Now, all parties here, the committee did issue a questionnaire to all parties. And first of all, we want to thank you for your detailed responses. I think looking at the responses, a lot of work went into it. You treated the questionnaire with respect, and we want to thank you for the effort that you have placed in responding to that questionnaire. So as we begin, I would like to invite brief opening remarks from the respective institutions that are here. And maybe we can start with you, Ms. Suku, and then we'll come to the front table, starting with the AD.
Thank you, Chair. Well, the Agricultural Society of Trinidad and Tobago, this year we are 181 years of age. We were established by an Act of Parliament, Chapter 6301, with a very clear mandate, and that is to advocate for the development of the agriculture sector in Trinidad and Tobago. Over the years, as the sector have moved in different directions with regards to adopting new technology and engaging farmers in more commodity organized association, so too has the work of the Agricultural Society of Trinidad and Tobago moved in that direction. To date, we have on register over 10,000 individual farmers with 86 farming groups, associations spread across this country. We continue to work collaboratively with different ministries, organizations, and institutions, both local, regional, and international, to foster the development of agriculture in this country. We have been, over the years, successfully partnering with the EU, where 2015-16, we successfully implemented the agriculture policy program, where many of our farmers were directly impacted positively through training and tangible benefits through field crates and other programs that the EU offered. Presently, we are engaged with the ATA Lugjack and the CSO for Business and other organizations, where we are also implementing 2 EU-funded projects. One is for the improvement of water quality for agriculture, and the other project, which is very, very impressive, where we are introducing new technology in schools. Because we believe that if you have to bring forth changes to the agriculture sector, it cannot be done with our present agriculture community, which we know is 50, 55 years and over. We have to start with the younger ones, where agriculture is part of the school curriculum. And so we have selected 6 schools, and we are about to engage in the implementation of that program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The Agricultural Development Bank last year celebrated 50 years. It is an organization that dates back to the early 1800s, when it was set up ready to assist with the cocoa industry. Since then to now, the bank has morphed into an institution that is known as the Agricultural Development Bank. It consists of an asset base of close to over $750 million and a loan portfolio of $395 million TT dollars. We report operationally to the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries with a mandate to assist in the development of the agricultural sector through providing affordable financing. Our interest rates vary between 3 to 5% in Trinidad and 2 to 4% in Tobago. We concentrate on all areas along the agricultural value chain, with the aim of trying to stimulate not only primary production, but also manufacturing and supporting distribution. We look for ways in terms of financing to assist in developing the productive element of the farmers, and continuously work with various stakeholders, including the ministry, other state entities, and other enterprises that are seen viable and valuable towards assisting in developing the farming community. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The Division of Food Production, Forestry and Fisheries under the Tobago House of Assembly is charged with responsibility for agriculture and fisheries in Tobago. Over the years, we have seen a steady decline in agricultural holdings due to several factors, some of which is an aging population. Most of the farmers are over 45, between 45 and 52. Small holdings, 2 hectares or less, little commercialization, and farming is crop-based, mostly small vegetable production, root crops, etc. There is lack of an investment by a private sector in terms of agriculture in Tobago, and that in itself lends to that, to the value-added chain along the way. Livestock production is also small holdings with farmers, but addition to which some farmers are part-time farmers. They have other jobs besides farming. So that in itself is a mixture of. But despite those challenges, agriculture remains a viable option in Tobago, especially with the increase in the tourism sector. We are seeing that it is becoming a viable option, and as such, we are trying to get the younger generation involved in terms of agriculture. The extension officers, we offer training, and this training is available in terms of the Kendall Farm School. We have the home gardening initiative. We have the tractor pull services that lend itself to land preparation. We have the planting materials from the tissue culture lab. And these assist the breeding stock. These assist in terms of developing and sustaining the level of agricultural production in Tobago. Under the fisheries, we see a similar trend in terms of there's a large number of fish, what we call fishermen or people involved in the fishing industry. But again, it is the challenge is in terms of the investment opportunities that's available. Most of the fishermen are also, some fishermen are part-time fishermen as well. There is no insurance, things like insurance. There's a problem with the gas in terms of the subsidy and the gas for the Tobago fishermen. There are a limited number of service stations that are available for the fishermen to access the fuel. But despite that, we have seen a variation in terms of the catch, ranging between 150,000 kilograms to 250,000 kilograms over a 5-year to an 8-year period. So that lends itself to encouragement in terms of the fishing industry. We have also increased the number of landing sites. We have a number of landing sites. We have improved the fish facilities around the island, and we have also had the construction of jetties, and so that adds to the sustainability of the fishing industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, good morning. Senator De Freitas is the name. My first question, I would ask to the Agricultural Society, Ms. Tuku. what preparations are taking place at the level of the Agricultural Society in relation to farmers given climate change? I'll start with that question.
First of all, we have to understand that the Agricultural Society of Trinidad and Tobago, we are not an institution that has been funded for development programs. However, through our linkages and partnerships, we have been able to engage institutions, work collaboratively with the university to do training. Even in-house, we have technical experts like Ronald Chan and others, because our board comprises 26 directors that comes from different spheres of agriculture, different training and background. So what we do through our monthly stakeholder platform meetings and through our community meetings with our farmers, we engage in a lot of training activities. We have been writing to government of the past and even present, requesting that a policy framework be established to engage others, meaning other stakeholders, to support what we call protected agriculture systems. Because with the climate change issues presently, what we are experiencing, the excessive, heavy showers and so on. And we just saw recently we had excessive heat. For us to have sustainable agriculture, this is the only method that we can really truly adopt at this stage. But it has to be done in tandem with proper training. Presently, our farming community continues to practice what is called traditional agriculture methods, which is open farm agriculture.
Okay, so the training is great and everything like that, because with the climate change and what we're experiencing now, you see certain parts of the year there's very little water, and in other parts there's an abundance of water, so much that we cannot handle. And yet we're still in the mindset of traditional farming. So one of the objectives of this Joint Select Committee and this meeting today is to find out more about the alternative methods of farming, digital farming. Are you finding, based on your membership, that there is a shift towards this type of digital farming that would help with these issues, especially climate change, where at one point you can't get water, other point there's too much water?
Have Ronald Chan answer you.
So what we have seen and observed within the farming community is that there's a generation gap. We have the older farmers over 45 years, over 50 years, majority doing the conventional methods. Then we find like younger people who they would do like hydroponics, aquaponics, but they do it in their backyard. And we'll notice that these are the people who have their full-time jobs, but has a technical background and would start learning the technology and doing it part-time. So it's more the younger generation who basically born in the technology age who we see moving in this direction.
You just made a very valid point, because that's where my next question was going to come in. So there's a gap, right? And that gap is going to rear its head very soon, because if the age of the farmers is 45, 55 and up, and there's nobody in between there because the younger farmers are, let's say, 25 and 30, then it means that when those 55-year-olds, by virtue of age or unfortunately passing away, are gone, then nobody's going to be doing farming in that gap.
You would not have commercial farming being done.
Right.
Yeah.
So then how do we prepare for that? Because as a nation, then you're going to see a sharp decline from one year to the other, or year on year, in relation to food production and our ability to feed ourselves outside of what we import. What are we doing to prepare for that?
Well, presently, there is no existing policy framework at the Ministry of Agriculture to support an initiative of that nature. However, the Agriculture Society, we have been working along with institutions like the Agriculture Development Bank and even university. We are presently engaged the Eastern Caribbean Institute on Agriculture, as we know it as ECIAF, because that's where your graduates in agriculture is coming out. And what we need to do in our recommendations, how can we address that gap? We need to find a mechanism that will provide the kind of financing that is required to encourage investment in agriculture, adopting these new technology. We have successful individuals involved in the sector like Ronald Chan and many others, Young Nawaz Karim and many others, and they are around the age of 35, between 32 to 35. We also have some of them around the age of 40, but they are what we call the traditional farmers that engage in open field agriculture. However, we have been promoting Ronald Chan method of agriculture, which is greenhouse technology and hydroponics, and we have been using that model to engage others. But the financing mechanism, the issue of land tenure, and all of these is required for us to really move in that direction in an aggressive way if we are to bring about the changes that is required.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad that you spoke about that, because ADB is here. Now, the issue with land tenures and whatnot, I've seen of recent times that the ministry is trying to deal with that in terms of farmers and whatnot, but the biggest deterrent remains financing. ADB, you just spoke to, in your opening statements, of having $750 million available and whatnot for this particular sector, but yet you're hearing from the Agricultural Society, we heard prior to you guys from the research arm of this industry, which is UE and UTT and whatnot, that financing remains a problem. So what kind of answers can you give to the population today, knowing that financing is a problem for those who are younger in the industry and willing to get into this industry, but they need the financing because alternative farming is capital intensive, we know that. What assurances can you guys give?
Thanks for the question. First of all, I want to clarify the $750 million is the total asset base of the bank. So it doesn't necessarily mean that that amount is available in liquid cash for distribution towards farmers. The bank is charged with responsibility of providing financing to the sector. However, as a financial institution, we must follow basic banking principles. So in order for clients to basically qualify for the loans, they would have to meet the requirements of the bank. You mentioned one of the issues being the issue of land tenure, and even registration as being farmers and other qualifying criteria. What we have done to assist the farmers, basically, one, is to ensure that the rates that we charge is basically affordable to them. We charge between 3 to 5%, trying to manage the cost and make it affordable. Secondly, to attract farmers to the bank, what we have done is the mechanisms by which we use to attract them. We have, in recent times, taken a more direct approach through our mobile banking unit, advertising through various mediums, and trying to basically take the farmers to the bank to encourage them to borrow. What we need to also understand is with regards to the psyche of a farmer, they spend a lot of time in the fields, a very proud group of people, and it's very demanding. So we have recognized that we definitely need to go out to them to not only promote the products and services that we have, but to understand, help them to understand the requirements of the bank that they need to meet in order to be able to access the funding. We do what we call project-based financing, which is the projects that we fund are expected to pay back the loans. So we also have a responsibility in terms of funding, but to also encourage the clients to basically undertake projects that they could maintain and sustain themselves and not put them in any worse off position that they were in before. So we would analyze the projects, basically looking at their ability to repay, right? Their capability to manage the project, the understanding of the conditions. You mentioned the issues of climate change. They need to understand how that is going to affect the methods that they use with regards to farming and how that impacts the ability to basically service the loan. We understand, however, the issues with the aging population. It is the same thing as the ADB when we look at the age group of the clients that we have. In order to attract the younger ones, we understand that we need to embrace and help them to understand and see agriculture as something that is positive and something that could basically sustain their livelihood, and not just as something that is intermediary in terms of sustaining a main income source. So it is a direct approach, making sure that they understand all the requirements, but that has to also be done in collaboration with other key players in the industry.
So I understand what you're saying. I mean, it's a bank at the end of the day, and the bank has to make sure they can recoup their money. So let me just ask this question, because alternative forms of farming tends to treat with some of the issues that traditional farming would encounter. Land space as a limitation is an example of one. You can use 3D farming now, buildings, less land space, similar or higher amounts of production. Artificial intelligence, which is what we spoke to the University of West Indies before you guys came in, and their readiness for the use of artificial intelligence in farming. Again, treating with the issues, controlling the environment in a more specific manner to ensure or guarantee your levels of production. So the question to ADB is, how much investment or how much loans have you all given out for alternative forms of farming? Given that those types of farming treats with a lot of what you've just said.
So currently, in terms of the alternative farming, we have approximately a total, in terms of number, like 49 loans totaling $20 million, right? And this will form three main categories, looking at aquaculture, hydroponics, and greenhouses. These are the three main forms of alternative farming that the bank would have funded over the years. And what we have seen, if we were to look at a trend, for example, in terms of the pattern going from 2016 to 2018, while we would have seen the approvals by value fall over that period, moving from just roughly $9 million to $6.2 million, the number of farmers accessing loans have actually increased. What that tells us is basically more people are interested, but they are accessing smaller amounts, and it could be that they are experimenting more on a subsistence farming basis or backyard project to understand it. So in terms of awareness of people being familiar with this form of farming, we've seen that is an increase, but the value fall.
Very nice. How many of those 49 loans have been repaid?
Right. So we have, out of the 49, we have we have 22 in arrears by number, and by value, you have $2.1 million in arrears with regards to that.
Arrears. So then that tells me that there are people coming in, getting loans, as you're indicating, which now explains more people interested, but they're taking a smaller amount.
Correct.
But their success rate is not the best.
Correct.
Which is also acting as a deterrent for why people are entering this particular field. I would love to find out, you may not have the answer, why the success rate is so low for something that should have a higher success rate if done properly. Like I said, we have all of the stakeholders here, so we have the research people before you guys, we have the money people, and we have the actual stakeholders here as well. And the research people are indicating that the training is being done, and they're getting into that and making sure that the stakeholders have access to the education and whatnot. Maybe I'll ask Mr. Kudis, what do you think is the reason for the success rate being so low?
Several contributing factors. One is that we still live in a society that believes in only traditional agriculture. So if you go to the market and as a farmer, you advertise, well, it's hydroponic lettuce or whatever, you have to spend like 5 minutes with each individual trying to explain to them how it is grown, what is the technique, you may use less pesticides and all of that. So you're talking about education and awareness, that's one. Two, there's the issue of market availability for produce. We continue to have a high import food bill because we allow it to happen as a government through weak policy framework. So we need not just to talk by local, eat local. We need to set the policy framework and engage the supermarket chain and so on to purchase from these farmers. The ADB just indicated that they have on record producers of this food. The question is, where do we sell this food? Because this method of farming is a little more expensive than open field agriculture. So you will have that issue of pricing and so on, but you have to use your selling point of healthy and safe food grown in a particular way. You have to use certain taglines. So those are just some of the issues. That's why the success rate is so low. And major to that is the awareness.
Understandably so. Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so from my experience, I started my project 7 years ago. And it took me a couple years to get on my feet because I basically had to learn from trial and error. I basically learned all what not to do before I became successful. And the reason was because the ministry and other agencies that are supposed to lead the way, they themselves don't have the technical expertise or an understanding in non-traditional farming methods. So take, for example, so we don't have anyone to basically lead us. There was no model farm where a young farmer getting involved in this technology could go to and learn new things, learn how to deal with the challenges. So basically, the agencies and ministry that is set up to lead the way, they themselves have to go digital. They themselves have to start getting involved in technology. Take, for example, let's say a farmer, a simple thing like, let's say a farmer want to apply for incentives. The extension officer will come on the farm with pen and paper. Then he have to go back to his desk, do it up. It had to go to somebody else, then to somebody else, a whole chain. Then let's say somebody else in that chain on vacation, you have to wait 6 months. Well, let's say there were technology, say field force automation, where the extension officer could come on the farm, have a mobile device, that information goes straight to the final decision maker and make life easy. So what I'm basically saying, the ministries and different agencies, they themselves not involved in technology to set an example. So the young farmers getting into this, we basically have to learn from trial and error, which is what happened to me. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, Member Parry.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. First, let me thank all of you for braving the weather to get to Port of Spain this morning. When I left my area this morning, I was 2 miles to get here. I want to tell you about the quality of your submissions. I started to read them at around 7 o'clock last night, and it was quite informative, very in-depth, and I want to thank you for taking the time and putting the effort in compiling, because it will end up in our final report. One of the mandates that we have here as a committee, really, it is to understand the challenges, seek your counsel and advice, and our job really is to write a final report that is going to go to the ministry and the minister, who then, in turn, is going to find policy solutions to solve the problems that are affecting you so that we can take the country forward. The 3 main issues that I think the whole conversation around non-traditional farming and what we call these modern technologies stems out of the fact that we have 3 issues here to deal with. 1, the issue of food security in Trinidad and Tobago. 2, food substitution. And 3, the issue of managing our scarce forex. I want to ask a broad question to these 3 groups, and I have a couple follow-ups that I would like to ask after. And the broad question is, in your specific area, do you see or do you agree that the drive towards digital agriculture, the move away, not wholly, but partially or more aggressively towards non-traditional methods of farming, will address those 3 areas that we are bedeviled with in terms of our country: food security, food substitution, and the managing of the forex usage in Trinidad and Tobago? That's the broad question. I'd like some commentary from that.
From the Agriculture Society of Trinidad and Tobago, answer is yes. However, we have to be very mindful of what we address and at what stage we address the issues. when you look at digital agriculture, digital farming, and so on, we have to understand that there are some aspects of agriculture has to remain what we call traditional. From where we sit at the Agriculture Society, you have to address it step 1, 2, 3 as we go about. Looking at the issue of land tenure, security of land tenure, that's an area, the land management division, that can be easily digitized. In fact, they're way behind. I remember some years ago when I sat on the EMBD board, we had made certain steps to move in that direction, working along with the University of the West Indies to actually get these agricultural lands into a GPS network and so on. So from the Office of the Commissioner of State Land, they could have actually in real time understand what land was under production, what level of production there was out there. So we will say that that area of land management you need to move aggressively in addressing that sector, that area of digitizing. Only when you do that, and as we move forward, then you will be able to address the other areas. You address now your production area. And in addressing production, you have to do it in tandem with financing, because production and financing comes hand in hand. Farmers need financing. So we will say the second aspect is to move aggressively in getting the farmers moving into that particular area. And I want to make the point that we have a lot of farmers that are very much interested in getting involved in the new technology. However, the major hindrance is financing. And then from there, we look at, of course, the issue of marketing. We at the Agriculture Society have developed a beautiful project. It's a digital platform, marketing platform, where real-time farmers can enter information as to production, and we have a forum on that platform for the buyers. So we'll be able in real time, within seconds, to match our buyers and our producers, our farmers, our processors, and so on. Even as exporters, you want to send a shipment to North America, we will even have listed on that platform freighters and brokerage services and everything. So that's an area that can be digitized immediately to give support in that regard.
So if, so what you're saying, that while yes, there is an opportunity to solve those problems using digital agriculture and modern methods, if we don't address those 3 items that you have identified, we may end up going nowhere very fast.
Not just addressing those items, that needs to address in that particular way,
Order.
1, 2, 3.
Okay. I just want to pass it on to our colleagues from the Tobago House of Assembly. I know Tobago may have its own stimuli in terms of how the agricultural sector works and the incentives to drive it and so on. What is your take on what Ms. Suku has now said in terms of some of those areas, and would you agree that digital agriculture going forward will solve some of the key issues of food security, production, spending, and so on in the Tobago economy?
Indeed, Mr. Chairman, member, it would have an impact, but however, I think all things has to be looked at in terms of a context. And in the Tobago aspect of it, there are particular cultural practices and traditions that hold fast in terms of how people operate and do things. And therefore, one has to be aware or be mindful of those factors in terms of how one implements a particular system or make particular changes, because there can be resistance to very good ideas. So it is a matter of how we sell it. The farmer has to see some immediate benefit. As you say, because of the farming community in Tobago is the over 45, not many of them are readily attracted to this high digital, mechanized, technological kind of concept. That is kind of alien to them. They have done it how their grandfathers and fathers have done it, and they are satisfied. It is the younger people who we have to get interested in terms of this kind of method. There are some other aspects where I understand that some farmers are using the camera system because of the problem of predial larceny. So that is one aspect of what I could call digital that is being used. I'll pass on to my Ms. Manzano, who maybe to shed more light in terms of her involvement.
Just 1 minute before you pass on to Ms. Montano, because I just want to ask you something based on the position that you've now made in terms of the cultural issues, and that can be an hindrance, a barrier to going forward in terms of digital. Now, would you agree that the new technologies, digital agriculture, solves some other issues, barring the issues of culture, issues around land management, in terms of, we had one of the educational agencies here before, who had a submission that there was a project where 1 acre of product in vertical farming was giving you about 20 acres of produce at the end of the day. And the question is, if that technology is solving issues of land management, water consumption, which we have a huge issue with in terms of the variations, climate change, peredial larceny, because if you have in production, in-house, in greenhouses, you have better and tighter security controls. Do you think that the drive towards it should really outweigh the cultural barriers that seems to be bedeviling us in terms of making that change? And if it is so, how would you see government policy helping or aiding us? Because clearly, the fixes for it, in my respectful view, it's really outshining or outweighing some of the cultural issues that we need to find a way around. But would you agree with that? What's your take on that?
Well, yes, it would. But I think the policies has to be what I will term user-friendly, in terms of it has to be simple. It has to be at the number of processes has to be simple, so that farmers and persons don't have to too many stops in terms of getting approvals. The whole question of land tenure, which was raised here, because land is held as generational lands, and the persons who presently occupy the lands don't have any titles to the land sometimes, because it is lands that passed down from great grandparents. But by and large, there are changes, but it is slow in coming, and one has to be mindful of how one introduces it, not forcefully, because there can be resistance.
But do you think we have the luxury of time for that, in terms of the situation we are in economically, where we are experiencing massive climate change? We have signed on to the Paris Accord. We have till
and that
2030.
and that is the challenge that we see.
So what I'm trying to get at from you, sir, is if we as a committee have to aid you in terms of policy that will deliver for not only Trinidad and Tobago, but in terms of the community spaces, we have to address those things.
Yes.
And our function here really is to hear from you what it is that you think can address those things from a policy perspective. And we articulate that at a government, at a ministerial level. So that's what I'm trying to get at. And I know you are toying with some of the ideas. I'm hearing what you say. Yeah. But I'm just trying to get out of you to tell this committee, look, gentlemen, we want to be at a better position in Trinidad and Tobago for our food security, be able to reduce the amount of money we're spending to buy lettuce from the United States when we could produce all the lettuce that we want in this country. But we need policy to create changes to create a different environment, policy to help finance, because if we don't have the capital expenditure to do it, then that is what I want to get from stakeholders when they come before the committee, because our purview lies in encouraging policy changes, policy direction. And, you know, I want to get that a bit from all the stakeholders going forward. So I agree with what you're saying, and perhaps I know Ms. Manzano has been waiting to give her contribution as well. Perhaps she might be able to push some of that along for us.
Ms. Manzano, before you do so, just to add to what Member Parry is saying, to put it in a broader international global context, in terms of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals set by United Nations that we as a nation have bought into, and actually it forms the basis for Vision 2030 by the government. And there are certain of the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly relating to agriculture, food quality, non-hunger, and all of those things. So we also have to look at this non-traditional farming and digital farming in the context of sustainable development and growth. And not just a question of food security and those things as well. So it's a bit broader picture that we are being challenged, you know, to attain these sustainable goals as well. So, Ms. Manzano.
I think what we're basically saying is that we are not negating the role of the traditional farming methods, right? But what we have recognized is that with the digital and the non-traditional farming methods, there's a resistance to acceptability of these systems, and that is primarily because of a lack of knowledge about the system, what is available, and that kind of thing, as well as the marketing aspects at the end point for these commodities. So what we at the division, through the Tobago House of Assembly, are suggesting, or what we've been doing, is that we assess the modern methods that are being considered, we investigate them, and we are suggesting that models be developed, they be evaluated, and the relevant training be issued in terms of sensitizing the public to what is available, the pros and cons of it, and how they can adapt to these things, to these different systems.
And I want to get Ms. Edwards into the conversation here. Fisheries are a huge part of the agricultural sector as well, and I too are from a fishing community in Mayaro there, and it is a key component of our agricultural back end. In terms of modernized methods of fishing and aquaculture and so on, what is Tobago's position on that right now? Have you seen any uptick in terms of the interest to pursue modern methods of fishing and so on, in terms of solving a problem of having to import fish products and so on? Is that something that you're looking at in the Tobago instance?
Okay, good morning or good afternoon again, everyone. The department is definitely, through the division, aware of the fact that the fisheries, not just in Tobago, but globally, would soon be seeing a lot of vast changes. In the Caribbean, I think we're feeling it a little less, but fishermen could tell you on a daily basis that they've seen depreciation in specific species, changes due to seasonality or just climate change on a whole. Through the department, we have seen over the years a growth in interest, just like in the other sectors, to go into different or alternative farming practices. The thing is with Tobago, and I will bring mention again to the cultural aspect, is that we have some hesitation as it relates to the consumption of freshwater fish. To some extent that I know in the years, they have toyed a lot with whether or not mariculture would make more sense as opposed to aquaculture. But in most cases, in any project, any new project, you have to bring the awareness to the individuals, which means giving them the exposure to the product that we're trying to get them to buy into. And that is what the department and through the division and the THA would love to, I guess, attack more aggressively. But we have the younger persons that have been interested in going into these new fields. Hesitation from our traditional fishermen who still believe to be a fisherman, you have to go out to sea. So it is about sensitization, whereas I agree with the statements that were made earlier that there should be some structure in the way we go about engaging in these new projects. We also have to take into consideration that we have to, as it relates to education and awareness, put the same amount of emphasis, and they have to work cohesively with the development of these projects. Because if a fisherman is being told to give up on going into sea to try this alternative concept, he also has to be sold on the fact that this is going to be profitable to him, the product is going to be marketed well, and he continues to earn. If, for instance, now we have the awareness through, I know Fisheries in the past would have introduced the consumption of lionfish, for example, and we would have gone out into the public, we did different preparations of it, we had talks with the public, everybody thought the entire fish was poisonous, so desensitization was necessary. We've now seen, and I'm sure in Trinidad as well, more consumption of the lionfish, which has aided in us trying to cut down the numbers and its proliferation on our reefs. So I do agree that it's not necessarily weighing the options as to giving cultural practices more credence over the importance or the urgency for which we need to address some of these matters, but basically taking into consideration, especially in the Tobago perspective, that it may take a little bit more education and awareness in terms of selling them on the idea. Previous exposure, for example, to the consumption of tilapia would not have been we didn't get good feedback from it because the practices weren't as refined as they are now, where, for instance, the tilapia would have been grown in a condition that would have affected the taste of it. Right now that we have more refined systems, you would realize that the quality of the water, the nutrient use, and so forth would affect or give you a better tasting output, a better tasting product. So it's about introducing them to it, rightfully having the processes in place or prototype in place that they could come through, see the information for themselves in real time and feel it out so they could now buy into it. But right now they're basically doing it on their own.
Let me ask you this as well. What percentage of food import that you get from Trinidad in terms of your current consumption in Tobago that is imported come out of our supply chain here in Trinidad? You have an idea?
From Roth estimate, and we can verify that, it's like between 70 and 80% of it is imported. We are trying to reduce that by we have an Eat Local campaign that is currently going on. And just like Ms. Edwards has said, we have been demonstrating the various preparation of local dishes using ground provision, again using non-traditional methods of preparation, doing several downstream production products of it, so that people are aware that from sweet potatoes you can get several other products beside eating sweet potatoes just like that in its raw state. So that is part of the efforts that the division is trying to put forward, so that we can reduce not only the import from Trinidad, but the import overall in terms of, because when it comes from Trinidad, it also comes from foreign. Yeah. So therefore, we see that as our effort in terms of the reduction of the food import bill.
Does the Tobago House of Assembly have any, are you partnering, or Ms. Su could probably answer that, do you work together with the Agricultural Society of Trinidad in terms of getting assistance with your farmers with some of the programs that she indicated that they pursue along those lines? Do you have currently any arrangement with them?
Well, the division works together closely with the Tobago Agricultural Society in terms of programs, because we have a number of programs that the division, training programs for farmers and also for fisher folk, because we work together with the fishing associations, and there are a number of fishing associations that the department work together with in terms of training in safety, in terms of HACCP standards in terms of fish, and also in terms of agriculture, in terms of farming methods, in terms of technology. And therefore, there is a close collaboration with the stakeholders.
Mr. Chair, I just want to jump in here and ask a question. How tied is agriculture to tourism in Tobago right now?
Well, the division of tourism and culture and transportation, and also the division of food production, forestry, and agriculture do not have a formal memorandum, if it's that was asking. But we see our efforts as lending itself to the tourism product in terms of providing sustainable food supply for the hotel industry.
Don't you think that having a memorandum of understanding between the two divisions would help increase, in the short term, agricultural production? Because market was one of the things that you indicated as a limiting factor. As much as tourism has its own issues, there is still some sort of a demand, and you could never beat the convenience of getting your produce right there on the island, as opposed to coming across on a boat from Trinidad or even internationally. You still just can't beat the quality of the fact that if it's mangoes, you just pick the mango from the tree an hour ago and now it's on your plate and whatnot. So that if there was some sort of a memorandum of understanding between the Division of Tourism and the Division of Agriculture, that there would immediately be a bump in demand for produce in Tobago that would allow two things. One, the people who are in agriculture right now, the 45 and up, and to sort of at least get some, bolstering in terms of the demand for their produce, but more importantly, act as an incentive for the younger ones to say, if I come into this, well, I know I can sell this to the hotels in Tobago, to the guest houses, and those places. Is that something that you all can look into?
Yes, it is something that can be considered.
Just before we go to Member Jennings Smith and then Member Mark, just following in terms of what Member Parry had and in terms of the ADV's response. But to add to it is that from the responses that we have gotten to the questionnaire, I mean, it's very clear that young people are attracted to non-traditional farming. The majority of persons engaged are young. That is one that is very promising because of the aging farmers that we have in the country. So in terms of accessing loans, we're talking about young persons looking to get into non-traditional farming. So age and track record and maybe their present status in terms of solidity, in terms of assets and all of those things would be limited. And then the other thing is that everyone has indicated that the initial capital cost for non-traditional farming is high, much higher than, say, the traditional farming. So that's another factor, high capital cost investment. And is the ADB, have you all started looking at any particular model outside of the model that is used for traditional farming, financing model that is going to facilitate the loans for non-traditional farming?
Okay, good morning once more. We have started to look at alternative type of financing where we focus mainly on the character of the individual. And this is a small size loan where we're looking at a testing period for about 2 years to determine the credit fundamentals and how they impact on debt repayment. Because certainly it's important for us to administer the loans, but more so to collect on them. To touch on the Tobago issue, though, at the ADB, we do have a memorandum of understanding in place with the THA, and we have been able to introduce the Sea-to-Shore loan product, which is really targeting the fishermen in Tobago. Incorporated at our level, we were able to tailor the loan product to administer funding for the more environmentally favorable type of fishing equipment. So funding is targeting, the four-stroke engines versus the two-stroke and so on. So at our level, we have been trying to incorporate strategies into our loan products to administer funding, considering the environmental impacts as well as the arrangements we have in place with our stakeholders.
But in the case of the non-traditional farming, say for aquaculture, I have seen, based on your response, that loans were made up to maybe $6 to $8 million. In terms of coming for vertical farming and digital farming, you're above the small loan range. Any particular thoughts on the possible models? Have you started looking at anything that could facilitate such loans?
All right, so our assessment of the market allowed us to look at the categories of borrowers. And in assessing the target market, as ASTT alluded to earlier on, we're seeing testing happening on a small-scale subsistence type arrangements with the hydroponics and so on. The gravitation definitely is more towards shade cultivation, protected agriculture type operations. It's limited in, as far as we have seen, with respect to the full adoption of digital technology in agriculture. So I think it's a stage type operation where we're moving more towards the hydroponic, the shade type operations, and then into possibly maybe we would see the movement into full digital technology in agriculture. I think the methods of production and even the farm arrangements in Trinidad, the closure of the plantation type systems and open field cultivation, we are seeing large acreages no longer being cultivated, would be limiting in terms of the adoption of full digital technology in the Trinidad and Tobago scenario. With respect to the adoption of new technology, as I said, we're seeing it more with the shade type arrangements for cultivation, and ADB stands its grounds with respect to providing funding at the affordable rate of 3 to 5% for the farmers and young entrepreneurs who are entering that type of market. We are assessing the movement from loans being fully dependent on collateral, but more dependent on your character assessment and your cash flow realization. So if I'm to suggest, inclusive of the recommendations for policy, it's to actually build the capacity of the individuals to, manage that project in a way that we can realize the projected cash flows, because that is what will repay the loans.
Let me just.
Just before you do, I think Ms. Suku, you wanted to get in on this.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to take off on a few points. One, a member, the Freitas, where you ask about agriculture linking to tourism. And having traveled internationally, looked at several agriculture models and so on, and had a good view of what is happening in other countries, I want to draw the committee attention to 3 particular models that exist in the Caribbean that is very successful. So in government shaping its policy, I will recommend that we engage the private sector, especially in moving in this particular direction. Let me take St. Lucia. St. Lucia has a supermarket chain called Super J. They had a lot of challenges in getting produce for their supermarket chain. I think at the time, which was about 5 years ago, when I visited, they had about 8 supermarket chains. And what they did, the private sector, they encouraged the farmers to go into greenhouse production. And this private sector body, Super J Supermarket, they provided the training and financed the setting up of the greenhouse. And they had a buyback system set up in a legal arrangement where they will now buy back the produce from the farmer. However, they actually decided what was to grow in those greenhouses. So they were not growing cucumbers in the greenhouse. They were growing bell peppers, cherry tomatoes, as they like. And they now have a very sustainable program linking the farmers direct to the supermarkets as well now to the restaurant, because Sandals Resort is now linking into that program. And that's where they get most of the produce. Let me move to Jamaica. Jamaica, the Sandals Resort, I think, you know, they have about 9, 10 or something like that in Jamaica. And they had a serious challenge in getting produce to satisfy their, when they have their tourists at these resorts. And what they did, they developed their menu geared towards local production. So when you go to the Sandals, you're not eating Americanized food. You're eating good Jamaican produced food. And Sandals themselves involve the farmers into this kind of farming, this kind of new technology. Again, they not only provided the training, they provide the setup, the investment capital for these greenhouses, and they provided transport services. So what they did, they trained a group of individuals that will now go to these parishes, and they will pick up on certain days the produce from these greenhouses, and they will package at a pack house that Sandals also provided for the farmers, right? And they will package, grade, and then deliver to the different resorts. And it was, I think, when I was there a few years ago, they had 15 trucks, and all of this capital expenditure was entered into by the private sector in arrangement with the farmers and, of course, the Jamaica Agriculture Society, as well as in terms of shaping government's policy. When you're traveling and you're coming through the airport in Jamaica, the departure lounge, you look up on the board where Burger King is, and you're not seeing white potato fries, it's cassava bami. So they are not just talking the talk, the policies set out by the government, they actually walking the talk. Back here in Trinidad, sometime around 2010-11, the Agriculture Society of Trinidad and Tobago was part of a program with Repsol, with their corporate social responsibility program. And where Repsol, but it was mostly in the Mayaro area, that's where they operate. And we were able to get in only one individual from the Matura area from MP Jennings-Smith constituency. And what Repsol did, over 6 weeks, they trained these individuals in greenhouse production. And then we selected from all of these individuals, participants, we selected 25 individuals. And Repsol funded the setting up of the greenhouses. When they set up the greenhouses, they brought in HADCO as the marketing body. And HADCO decided what was to grow in these greenhouses. So there was also a marketing program, direct marketing program attached to the production. So it's not that you don't want or people are not prepared or willing to adopt new technology. I could give you 500 farmers right now with who prepared to go in that direction, but where is the financing, where is the government support, where is the policy framework to support this kind of initiative?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I've made this statement before at prior JSCs like this one that dealt with agriculture. And in listening to all the different areas as it relates to agriculture, from financing to the research to the stakeholders, I'm going to make the statement again because it seems to be coming through. In Trinidad and Tobago, we know how to do agriculture. We do not know how to do the business of agriculture. There's a fundamental difference between those two things. I just heard ADB state that one of the things they're doing now is looking at the character of the farmer. And all of that is fine because it's part of loans and, you know, from a bank's perspective, you need to do that. But if I turn to ask you, when you get a business plan for a fish farm, do you understand what the assumptions of those business plans mean? One of the first assumptions of a fish farm is that you are able to get your fish to a particular size to sell it for a particular price in a particular time. And if you cannot assess that as ADB, the risk of that particular farmer being able to do that, he can make $0 in 6 months after borrowing how much ever millions of dollars. So if you don't understand the economics of the digital farming, the risk and the assumptions that come with farming, whether it's livestock or crop, then you are going to be lending money that you're not going to get back. So you have to understand the business of agriculture. That is why in St. Lucia and in Jamaica, when the private sector gets involved, they know business, regardless of what they're selling. So they will tell the greenhouses what to grow. You're not growing mangoes when St. Lucia need potatoes. That's bad business. So once we get into the business of agriculture, you go into the schools, you teach the children how to make $1 from a lettuce, as opposed to just how to grow the lettuce. And that is when things will change.
Okay, we'll have Member Janice
Basically,
Smith, and after her, Member Mark.
I really wanted to know from the ADB, you speak about character loan, but you speak about young people. What is really character? What do we determine? What are the criterion to satisfy the bank on character loan when you're talking about young people who may not have a home, not have a water television set or whatever? What do you look at for determining a person can make it through with a character inquiry? What do you look at?
Okay, so the different fundamentals that we look at, I will start with, first of all, we look at the proposal that's presented to us. We would also look at the person's training and involvement, more so their experience. We would also look at their credit fundamentals and how they have reacted to debt repayment in the past. So more than likely, the proposer would come into the bank, they would meet with us on their grounds, where we'd engage discussions, and through those discussions and the proposal that's presented to us, we would then gauge the character assessment based on certain categories of requirements for the ADB. So it is not done in isolation. It's one of the areas that is assessed among the different credit fundamentals.
And I'm concerned because when I meet with my young people in my constituency and other constituents also, they are most of them unemployed, live in a little house somewhere, back of their parents' home, and they may have children already too. But in terms of that criterion you used as to the credit, a credit background. When you talk about a young person who wants to get into farming, it's difficult to determine based on a credit background because, they are snatching at, they're trying to get an opportunity which they expect the bank to extend to them. And another major issue is the absence of title to land. In my area especially, we have that it's a severe problem where there are land available from handing down, but grandparents or great-grandparents, they don't know how to do it, to even separate the land to give a portion to their family members. But I can tell you there are numerous young people who are willing, and they are engaging in planting on state lands, squatting, planting. I see it happening. They are mostly engaged in planting on state lands and what you say, squatting lands. Not only to build houses, people squat on, but agriculture people squat on state land and plant. So that when you spoke about character, I thought maybe you were looking at, first of all, the person is not engaged in criminal activities or things like that. So really raise that because everybody deserves a chance now to make a living. So I'm eliminating that. So character, would it look like, well, if that person plants in the backyard or if they're planting on a piece of ground somewhere else, and that could maybe benefit them in terms of assisting them in getting a loan facility, short-term loan facility. And after this question, I want to put to you, you speak about the bank giving short-term loans. Can you give us an idea for the past year? I wouldn't go into 3 years. How many of those loans were disbursed? But I want you to answer the first question that I ask you. Really and truly, because there are numerous young people out there waiting anxiously to get that opportunity. Because this morning, we spoke to another group of people here, and they spoke clearly that non-traditional farming relates specifically to vegetables. And then we saw some really, when I travel, I ask for sweet potato fries. That's my favorite thing now. And we're talking about sweet potato and cassava, and those are traditional root crops that, we don't pick up with doing the non-traditional methods. So that, all of these are the main things that face me on a daily basis. And to guide policy, we need to have some kind of strong, suggestions. So I want to know how the bank is thinking in terms of meeting those particular individuals, right? They have lots of land space, but they are facing the same problems of pest control and all these type of things. So you're not talking about planting just one lot of land or two lots of land. You're talking about to make a profit. And I'm concerned about those things. And if you could get some answers, kind of guide us into developing policy, it would be great. And I want to really compliment Tobago because I had some interventions with Tobago, and they have a system where they target young people and they kind of guide them through, as my colleague was saying a while ago, they guide them through the process because they can fail. They can fail very easily. They guide them through in Tobago, and maybe you have a best practice in Tobago. It's there. Just utilize it in another area.
Carrying on, first of all, to explain the issue of the character lending, it's really an area that we have always paid attention to, but to address some of the specific issues that you would have identified, we felt it necessary to explore that area in greater depth. Because it's precisely what you are saying that we have recognized, that the younger ones don't have capital, they don't have the experience. So when they come to the bank, the major issues is they don't meet the qualified criteria. This is why when I mentioned earlier, in terms of kind of taking the bank outwards and going to the farmers, to try to understand what they are requiring, but not only the individuals. What do the individuals in the community that these people live think of them? What is the reputation that they have? And that is what we're looking for. By extension also, to get into agriculture, it seems that a lot of people would gravitate to it because it seems that the easiest and first thing to go to. But it is a skill set, and we need to understand that. So there are various training programs through the ministries and other entities, even EWI and stuff like that. If these individuals have some kind of, at least a letter of reference where they have attended some kind of training program, the bank could place reliance on those things. So it's getting to understand and be a little more intimate with the client.
I want to stop you. I want to ask a specific direct question. How many of those people have you assisted with that type of a background? People who would have had training in various short-term, because there are many training available in my area, and I'm not referring specifically to my area now, but I know there are training available, and there are people who did it, they went to the bank, and they still come back to the member of parliament complaining that they didn't get that kind of a response. So tell me, how many persons came to the bank over the past year, and you will give some kind of consideration to those particular things that you speak of now, and they got through with loans? Can the committee be given that kind of information so we know the bank is on that direction?
Right. So I don't have the specific figures. I would say, however, in terms of the actual number, it would be a small amount, and an even smaller percentage of that would have actually accessed the loans. What we have been able to try to do is to try to understand what are the issues that they are facing and what we need to do. And that is what has led us to develop the concept of really understanding and going on the character element to assist these clients.
No, well, maybe Mr. Ramnath, if you don't have that information with you at this time,
Yeah,
could you submit it? Could
Sure.
you submit it in writing to the committee?
Sure.
So that it will be added to our.
When he spoke of the whole issue, that they would have recognized the whole issue of title to land. And can you give us an indication or an indicator as to loans dispersed under these type of situations where there was difficulty in obtaining title to land?
Okay, well, rightly so. Tenancy is an issue. Particularly, what we have looked at is trying to find a means to really treat with that issue. So, specific to state lease land, and that is where you have a lot of those existing circumstances. As you rightly said, you have people who are planting on those lands. to address the gap that exists in terms of the state lease not being available, up-to-date lease not being available. Some of the measures which we have implemented to try to bridge that gap will be sending correspondence directly to the ministry, the sub-offices, for a response, just to really acknowledge that they are aware that these individuals have been planting for X number of years. Getting that response, we will utilize that. In addition to that, once our visits are done to the sites and we corroborate that these clients have been planting, we get the response from the ministry sub-office. We get those customers to basically sign a tenancy waiver form to us, acknowledging that they do not have proper tenancy for these sites, but that they are committed to the loan that they are applying for. So those are just some of the measures that we have been using in the interim to try to bridge that gap, to treat with the issue of land tenancy.
Your permission, Mr. Chair, I just would like to have some data too, because, words are different to data. So could you please supply us with the numbers that you would have impacted upon over the past year?
Okay, after Member Mark, I think Member Parry has one question again, and then we'll start to wrap up the session because we're running out of time. So, Member Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to the team. Mr. Bernard, welcome. And the ADB and my colleague from the Agricultural Society. I wanted to ask Mr. Bernard, is there a special program in Tobago under the THA that would provide young people who are interested in agricultural activities, be it fisheries, root crop, whatever area, that is available to young persons who are interested in getting involved in agricultural production. And it's why this ambit. Can you share with us if there's such a program? And if there's such a program, what are the terms and conditions available to those persons who are desirous of accessing that program?
Under the Division of Food Production, there's a Kendall Farm School, and that provides training in terms of agriculture for young persons. I would ask Ms. Mazzano to give further details on the number of programs that are offered at the Kendall Farm School.
But before she gives that indication, is there a particular sum that is allocated, if it's in the hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars, that is used to encourage young people via the Kendall Farms? Is there an allocation that the THA would provide to this particular division for purposes of training young people? How do young people access funding if they want to get
But
involved?
no, the school doesn't give funding. We do give funding.
No funding?
No, we don't give funding. We provide strictly training
Okay.
to persons who want to get involved in agriculture.
Simply training?
Simply training, yeah.
All right, may I ask Mr. Ramnath? I have information where the Aquaculture Association of Trinidad and Tobago have approached the ADB over the last few years and have encountered, according to them, several hindrances in accessing funding from the ADB. In fact, they claim that commercial banks have provided them and their members with easier access than the ADB. Would you want to elaborate or maybe clarify whether, first of all, can you confirm for us whether this association, the Aquaculture Association, has approached the ADB and requested discussion with its membership as it relates to loans, and were discussions ever held with this association as it relates to providing loans for its membership? Can you clarify for us?
Thanks for the question. To my knowledge, the Agriculture Association has not approached the bank for funding as an association per se. That is to my knowledge. What I can say is that to date we have we have 12 loans given for aquaculture, totaling a value of $11.4 million. So we have supported that particular subsector. Any loan that comes to the ADB would have to meet a minimum criteria. Our approach is always to try to assist the client because we are charged with the mandate to assist in development. And even if at the point in time we are not able to assist, we would identify to the client what are the major challenges that they face, to try to have them rectify that and approach the bank. But specifically to the association, I have no knowledge of that.
Okay. Let me ask the president of the Agricultural Society a question. We understand that less than 1% of hydroponics and aquaponics farmers have automated systems that are controlled by their mobile devices. I wanted to ask the president, why are farmers not utilizing digital farming? That's the first part. And secondly, do farmers lack the knowledge of how to implement and use digital farming, as far as you are aware? President of the Agricultural Society, please.
To answer your first question with regards to the 1% of individuals using their mobile phone, technology requires investment, capital investment. And as we would have heard from the ADB earlier, there is no direct policy or initiative at the Agriculture Development Bank to finance such initiatives. Earlier, we spoke about the generation gap. And if I were to take off on the point committee member Glenda Jennings-Smith made with regards to that particular constituency, which I belongs to, those young people who want to get involved, they are planting. What support mechanism is there that exists that these young people who don't have any credit rating, who decides on their character, and there is no one to really support in terms of guarantee on these loans for these individuals. These individuals, that's the generation gap we are talking about, because there is no system, there is no financing available, there is no structure, there is no government policy or initiative to support this group of people, and this is the group that has to adopt this kind of technology. If you go to a farmer 50, 55 years and you talk to him about greenhouse farming and automation and so on, he will just look at you. Probably he will do what we call a drip hose irrigation system because of the water scarcity. He may do that, but if you go to most of the open field agriculture, we are seeing traditional farming methods because that changeover requires investment. And not just investment, it requires investment at a competitive rate. Because remember, you are now going into a whole new area. And as Ronald would have alluded to, there is also going to be a learning curve along the way. So mistakes will be made. The greenhouse in Valencia, where the temperature is of a certain degree, and the greenhouse in open Orange Grove, they will function differently, although you may grow the same commodity because of the temperature changes in the different location. So all these are things that has to be considered, and you have to have a proper mechanism in place to address this issue with this generation of young people that we have available that is unemployed, that we want to get employed. Your second question with regards to, if you may repeat it, sir.
Yeah. Insofar as farmers are concerned, do you think that there is a lack of knowledge on the part of the farmers and in the whole issue of implementing
Correct.
digital, technology and farming in general?
Yeah, correct. In Trinidad, we will remember these words: seeing is believing. You will bring farmers in the Hyatt, and you will give them the best for a day. And all that you teach them, when they leave the Hyatt and they go back to what they are accustomed to. But you do like what we have done in the Agriculture Society. I have taken delegations even last year, collaboration with the University of Florida. And we were actually, because we want to encourage export agriculture. And we actually took this group of people to see the prices of our Caribbean produce, how it is packaged, the kind of price, the volume to interact. We went to the University of Florida and understand how they do extension services, where the involvement of the farmers in selecting these extension officers. So yes, there is that issue, but it has to be addressed differently. If you want different results, you have to start thinking outside of the box and do things differently. You need to have these farmers. I took delegations to Jamaica. I have engaged my young people on my board. 60% of the 26 directors on the board of the Agriculture Society are like Mr. Chan and others, young people under the age of 35 that I have sent off to international regional conferences. I've sent them off to other learning programs and let them learn what other countries are doing. I have introduced them to a young lady from Barbados, Miss Keely Holder, and she have a fully automated 25-acre farm. So they were able to learn from Keely how she got to where she is. So that's the kind of learning curve, the direction you need to take if you want to get these young people involved. And may I make a recommendation to this committee, since you are looking towards making recommendation in developing and shaping policies to address this critical issue of food security. You have every year hundreds of graduates coming out of the University of the West Indies, funded by my tax-paying dollar through the GATE program. What am I as a consumer benefiting from this? Because these people go out there and they're unemployed. And these are people that we have funded for 4 years, ECIAF. And these are people who are trained and knowledgeable in agriculture. I am recommending that government look at putting a financing mechanism in place at the university, at ECIAF, that will be available to these young people. So when they graduate, they can get involved in some kind of agriculture, whether it's to utilize the funding for a greenhouse setup or whatever the case may be. So, there are challenges, but we need to address the challenges appropriately.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, thank you. To the ADB, right? I just want, by passing, I remember there was a family that came to my constituency office, and they said that they came to the ADB and they was trying to get a loan because they were trying to execute some technology in poultry farming where they can actually do it without the use of antibiotics. And they said that they presented their own land, they had deed and title, and the loans were refused. They may have been refused for other things, but this is something that I thought that, these are the issues, I think, why some of our young farmers find it difficult to engage in getting loans and so on to start these businesses as well. What I wanted to find out, capitalization and cost is one of the biggest hurdles that I've heard for the entire day in terms of digitalization and using the non-traditional methods. In the energy sector, over the last few years, we have been able to encourage investments in the energy sector by accelerated capital depreciation and so on. Is there a method, or do you conceive a method by which your agencies can liaise with the prospective financial agencies, tax bodies, to see if our young farmers, as long as they are registered businesses, can utilize facilities like accelerated depreciation, so within 1 year, the state will be able to depreciate down back the equipment, write it off as taxes, and they can move into their second, third, and fourth year without the burden of an installment for this capital option. And the reason why I mention that is that I am positively sure that we cannot take piecemeal approaches in this thing anymore. We have to start making quantum leaps of thinking in order to create the kind of change that we want. We do not have the time for it. So going forward, I'm just hoping that the agencies that are put in place to foster and drive this change take that into consideration, look for unique opportunities in thinking in economics and accounting, because the models that exist for the last 50 years, they're not going to work if we want to push this type of development in not only agriculture, but in all our sectors. So I just wanted to lay that idea, plant a seed, and hopefully at some point in time, as you negotiate your way forward in your own administrative realms, through ministries and so on, that you could perhaps talk about this type of change in terms of moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before I invite closing comments from the respective bodies that are here, brief closing remarks. I just want to throw out one final question to the parties here. In terms of the Ministry of Agriculture, and what would you like to see in terms of particular policy or framework, legislative framework, for the advancement of the non-traditional farming and digital farming? Are there any specific things you would like to point out to the committee?
From the Agriculture Society of Trinidad and Tobago, we would like to see, presently the Ministry of Agriculture operates very alienated, separate and apart from. So we as the stakeholders, we are not engaged in these discussions. We are not aware of what are the programs, what are the initiatives of the Ministry of Agriculture. What we would like to see, and I have made this point at previous JSC's meeting, is what is called a stakeholder committee setup, not chaired by the minister, but chaired by the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture. This stakeholder committee must have the financiers, the marketers, the producers, and of course other related agencies. Every year, we find ourselves in trouble with WASA. So because water is very important to agriculture production, a representative of probably the Ministry of Works, because infrastructure is also very important. So I would like to see in moving forward that the ministry aggressively, immediately, urgently establish this stakeholder committee comprising the relevant personnel, so we can decide from where we are now, where we want to go, and what is the roadmap that each agency will play in moving this process forward. That's one thing I would like to see from the Ministry of Agriculture. Secondly, there is a serious challenge with regards to the ministry's extension division. We cannot want to engage and encourage a technology-driven agriculture sector when our extension officers that we employed doesn't have a clue of even what the word digital farming means. So we need to see the right kind of people, not the friend and family who you know, who you don't know. We want to see the technically capable, qualified people employed in the ministry and doing the job of the Ministry of Food Production, fulfilling that mandate. Thirdly, the other area that I would like to see, I would like to see from the Ministry of Agriculture a special fund set up. I don't know who is going to administer the fund. We are the Agriculture Society of Trinidad and Tobago. We are prepared to be part of the process. We want to see a special fund set up that will support young people who are serious about agriculture with a proper business plan, does not have tenancy but has the willingness and the drive to do agriculture to support local food production. What I would also like to see the Ministry of Agriculture do as immediate, all these pack houses they have all over the country that they use taxpayers' money to build, hand it over to the stakeholders to whom it was built for. Because one of the setbacks that you have when you go to PriceSmart and Massey and these other entities as farmers to sell your produce, there is the issue of grading, packaging, sanitizing. Farmers do not have the facility on their holdings to do that. And this is what these pack houses was built for, to support the marketing aspect. You can invest the entire budget that is coming, which is $60, $70 billion in agriculture, unless you have that framework that could drive the sector forward, that includes marketing as a priority, how we market our produce, where we market our produce. Nothing is going to make sense.
Thank you, Mr. Ramlan.
Thank you. The recommendations from the ADB has to do with we as the funding arm, we are highly dependent upon markets. The market is what's going to repay the loans and it was going to act as a pull factor for primary production. Specific to digitization and the use of technology, what we recommend is a focused approach. Our experience looking at what happened with the hydroponics, aquaculture, and projects in the past is that people would have gone into it, but only upon really actualization they would have realized challenges. And that is why we saw a reduction in number and value of loans over a 3-year period. We think we need to have a focus in terms of identifying core commodities that we want to test this digitization with, assist with the affordability in terms of the pricing, have people properly trained in it, a support mechanism if they run into problems, because as a bank and a financial institution, we want to support. However, we need the input of other agencies in the process to help us to be able to execute the loans. If we are able to focus and be able to test how certain core commodities work, then we can expand it to other commodities. The issue of the land tenure, for example, it is a real problem. But it is not something that the ADB could form. We need, once we could get some kind of correspondence stating that here what we identify the persons as there, we are willing to support and go forward. But other entities have to support us. So I think it's really looking at the value chain, understanding the rules and testing it before we go into full-scale production. When we look internationally at the role of digitization and the impact, it is great. We need to understand the scale of our production, the size of farms that we currently have, and how prepared we are in terms of our infrastructure to support it. The ADB stands ready as a developmental financial institution to do so, but we need the support of the other entities to help us to ensure that digitization really does what it's supposed to do, and not at some phase leads us back to traditional farming methods.
Bernard?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. From the perspective of the Tobago House of Assembly, we would like to see at least the farmers in Tobago in terms of the non-traditional aspect. One of the challenges is the electricity costs in terms of these setups that will consume electricity, and therefore if electricity can be provided for these projects at a cheap cost or at a cost that is bearable by the farmers, especially, as we said, the young people who have very little capital, who are now trying to start up, then that can be a policy. The other aspect is that there has to be a public-private sector partnership. I don't think the state, at least the THA, can adequately fund agricultural development on the island, and therefore we need substantial private sector investment in terms of both the marketing and the add value production end of it, so that the farmer will know that there is a market and there is profitability and a sustained profit. Not to say that the price of the thing will be high, very high at one point in time, and then very low at another point in time. addition to which funding for non-traditional, and that funding has to be based on the development, as Mr. De Freitas rightly said, on a business model that is targeted towards this non-traditional methods of agriculture and agricultural practice, and therefore that has to be crafted. Also, together with that, there has to be the formalization of an Eat Local policy, where in our institutions, in many places, what we consume has to be mandated that at least upwards of 50% or more has to have local input. And if we do stuff like that, then there is the trajectory that agriculture would be sustainable, that the farmer and young people, and people maybe of all ages, would see agriculture as a viable option. Right now, there are people who are seeing it, but the challenge is, can it be sustained? And that's where these policies and programs will have to look at the sustainability of agriculture. Thank you very much.
I think in response to my question, we more or less did get more or less closing remarks. So I would like to thank everyone who came for the effort you have made to be here and for your genuine responses to the questions. We have had a very engaging discussion, a very fruitful discussion, and I would like to thank all of you for that. I'd like to thank members of the committee as well, but also give you a reminder that we are not finished. On suspension, after we will be reconvening for a short while because the committee has other business to address. So thanks once again, and this meeting is suspended.